Okay, I think we are a good number now. I think we can start the webinar. I think people are still joining, but I'm pretty sure we can start and they will catch up later. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Lorenzo Murzilli. I am the founder, co-founder, and co-CEO at Murzilli Consulting, and I will be the moderator of this session on HAPS and airspace integration, basically how we plan on connecting stratospheric and conventional operations. We have a fantastic panelist line out today with us, and I think I will let them introduce themselves very, very shortly. The bit of the logistic of the session, we have a few slides that everybody will be allowed to present, of course. We will then go into our panel session, and at the same time, we will have a Q&A. People can ask questions using the Q&A feature of the tool. We have only 1 hour, and we are very, very rich in content and in questions I want to ask. Therefore, without further ado, I would ask everybody to introduce themselves. I think starting from Nicki, you will be the first, and feel free again to go through your slides as necessary.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. Well, thank you all for having me on this webinar today. My name is Nicki Harricharan, and I am currently the CANSO Operations Program Manager. CANSO is the Civil Air Navigation Services Organization. I started my career as an air traffic controller with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and then spent some time working in air traffic flow management, where I have dealt with maneuvering air traffic around complex operations, from major events, severe weather, and most recently integrating space operations into the national airspace system. Today, I lead the Global Operations Program at CANSO, working with ANSPs and industry to support more integrated, efficient airspace operations and the seamless integration of new users into the system. CANSO is the global voice of air traffic management. We represent 96 ANSPs worldwide, which essentially translate to supporting around 90% of global air traffic. We connect over 34,000 individuals across the industry and nearly 100 industry partners. So we're here today to talk about HAPS integration. Today, HAPS operations are still largely managed case by case, treated as an exception with limited predictability and scalability. But where we're heading to is very different. We're looking towards a more routine, sustainable, and fully integrated operation. The challenge is we're not opening or operating, I should say, in a vacuum. This is already complex, multi-user airspace with conventional traffic to include not only conventional traffic, but military and space operations, and it's inherently cross-border operations. So integration requires system-wide coordination. Really, we're shifting from managing HAPS as an exception to integrating it as a part of the system. So to enable that, a few things are critical from an ANSP perspective: standardization, shared procedures, and common concepts, airspace integration, moving beyond accommodating to operationalizing, information sharing, especially intent and real-time visibility, and coordination across civil, military, cross-border, and multiple stakeholders. Alongside that, regulatory frameworks need to evolve with the operations, and ANSPs are central to making this safe and predictable. But it's really not just the ANSP's challenge, or I like to say an opportunity for growth. We're not in this alone. It is a system-wide transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, Leo, you are the next.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Léonard Bouygues. I am the Director of Aviation Strategy for Sceye, which is a lighter-than-air HAPS platform. Prior to that, I worked as an independent advisor across high altitude and low altitude on the integration of highly automated systems in the sky, both like small UAS industry, both small UAS, high altitude industry and government. Also was the director of safety for Kitty Hawk, which was an autonomous eVTOL, and the head of flight operations for the Google Loon project, which flew around 2 million flight hours across the globe in the stratosphere. Next slide, please. Very quickly about Sceye. So it's a lighter than air HAPS platform with proven track record. It flies as a balloon, essentially stable above flight level 500. It transitions the airspace as like uncontrolled balloon ascent, and once at altitude, it is able to oppose wind, moderate winds with a lateral assistance, and it uses wind currents to navigate, plus that assistive navigation. We flew several missions. Sorry, just on the previous slide. The last one was a few weeks ago, where we went all the way from New Mexico in the United States, traveling to the shores of Brazil, and were able to demonstrate station keeping. Next slide, please. But it's so Sceye is one example. What I want you to remember from this kind of introduction is that HAPS are more than just pretty slides. There's a whole industry that is actually flying, with millions of flight hours actually flown already. Today, hundreds of balloons and HAPS in the sky today, and between the lighter than air and the heavier than air HAPS, really a wide ecosystem, very diverse vehicle. And you can see in the right corner of this, like an example of actually a fleet of HAPS providing connectivity, interconnected network of HAPS providing a 4G network in Kenya back in 2017. Next slide, please. So in order to integrate these new platforms, which are not behaving like traditional aircraft, they are A, highly automated, operated as fleet, B, with a unique and atypical performance that can change over time. So performance at night may not be the same as performance during the day. We need new concepts, and we've been working very closely, industry, governments, industry associations like CANSO, to create those new concepts that are necessary to manage this new airspace. It goes from the FAA new high airspace traffic management HATM concept, the work ongoing by ECHO, simulation work ongoing with NASA, and many industry papers and concepts. Next slide, please. One final message I want to leave you with is, despite these new aircraft being like a reality, the higher airspace is still like pretty virgin. Above flight level 500, there is not much. And higher airspace is a unique opportunity for us to try radical innovations, to try things, concepts and tools beyond the incremental innovation, to try things safely that we can try safely in higher airspace that would be not safe enough or too disruptive if things go wrong, to try at lower altitudes. But these concepts may one day inform some of the concepts and tools that may improve the efficiency of airspace management at low altitude. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leo and Marta.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marta García Gutiérrez. I work at Telespazio Ibérica in Madrid as a UAS Programme Manager. First of all, I would like to thank you, DroneTalks, for organizing this excellent webinar. I'm very pleased to be here, surrounded by such professionals from the sector. I will give a very brief overview of my company and introduce our first steps in the HAPS domain during the next slides. So first of all, just to introduce, Telespazio Ibérica is part of the Leonardo and Thales groups, and it's also part of the Space Alliance, a strategic joint venture between both companies to deliver end-to-end space services. So that we bring more than 60 years of experience at group level, because Telespazio Ibérica itself has over 40 years of experience in this year. and providing innovative services to end users. So let's say our focus has mainly been on emergency management, delivering invaluable information to support analysis and improve decision making at that area, let's say. So following this line, we are now strongly involved in projects where UAS play a key role in providing this type of information. This includes small UAS, we call them small UAS, mail platforms, and also HAPS, all of them aimed at delivering valuable data to information centers. No? And this is where the ISEC project that you can see in this slide comes in. ISEC is our main HAPS-related project with a budget of around 22 million euros. We are working together with Pegasus, and our end user is Parque Tecnológico Fuerteventura. The project started in 2024 and is currently ongoing. So during this project, if we move to the next slide, please, we have faced several challenges. We obtained the first authorization in Europe for a long-distance HAPS flight, meaning BVLOS operations. We also navigated a regulatory transition between SORA 2.0 and SORA 2.5 that was strongly difficult for us when we were working through the authorizations. And with this, we were working very, very closely with AESA and the EASA, which of course has been a very valuable experience for us. And with all of this, we have developed a tool called GIC, Geo-Information Center, which allows real-time streaming from these platforms, providing useful imagery and video to our end users. So moving to the next slide, key aspects of this work include what I've already said: close collaboration with authorities, adapting also infrastructure to this type of platforms. That is something that is not easy at all, and especially in Fuerteventura. Coordinating multiple stakeholders such as ANSPs, airports, and conducting, of course, dedicated risk analysis. And so far, just for you to know, we have already completed around 20 flight hours in Fuerteventura, 20 flight hours associated to tests operations, collecting also valuable data for this GIC I've also mentioned before, that is compatible also with satellite imagery. That it's a very, very important point for us because we are aiming to have this imagery and video valuable for our end users, right? So yes, through the next slide, what we wanted to transmit is that we are here to collaborate, to keep learning, and of course we are very, very pleased to be here and to share our experience and a very nice discussion with all of you. So thank you very much.
I would just ask, for help from Leo in this, because everybody here is talking about HAPS operations, right? And we are talking about HAPS, and we are talking about, typically we are talking about persistence at altitude. We have seen balloons and things like that. But what I wanted to ask you, Leo, is like if you can describe for us what an HAPS operation actually look like. We have worked in different types. And where are the actual challenges that you see operationally when you look at the profile of an actual mission that you have, again, contributed in several different of them? So maybe not specifically to Sceye, of course, Sceye is, but like if you can give us an understand, so we are all on the same page, what are we talking about when we're talking about HAPS operation?
Well, so the variety, the range of operations is very wide. So one of the challenges actually that every HAPS operation is different, and two flights of the same HAPS can be quite different. HAPS in general tend to be very long endurance. So we've seen flights up to like a year long. There are flights that cannot necessarily be planned end to end. And there are flights that can be, for some systems, very automated. So you have several challenges, generally three buckets. One is, how do you integrate highly automated system into the airspace. When you have a fleet that is managed by like algorithms and not necessarily the capacity to talk to a controller, how do you integrate that level of automation, of self-management of the system and to the airspace and deconflict? You have the challenge of getting the right authorizations. Not all the regulations today are adequate for the risk proportionate authorizations. And then you have challenges that are related to like the integration of new roles. When you have like with this new automation, like the systems are managed differently, and therefore you have like new roles that do not necessarily fit into the existing framework of pilots. And so generally, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but like those three buckets: long endurance, highly automated, atypical performance that you need to integrate in the airspace, and yes, this unique aircraft that doesn't behave like other aircraft.
Perfect, thank you. And I wanted to ask Marta, because you were talking about you got your first authorization in Europe. I see already there is a question for you. Actually, we can answer it live. On like who was responsible for issuing it, what was EASA, and how the interaction between the two worked. But for me, I think one of the questions I'm really interested, we seem to kind of agree, and from the presentation both of yours and Leo's, is that these operations are actually happening, right? We have flight hours ongoing, aircrafts are up in the sky. It's not just some random testing or some few minutes of flight. We're talking about days of flight, hours of flights. So the question is, what do you think at the moment, having done this approval, you think is the gap that exists between a platform that seems to be very good, technically capable, and the fact that the operation can then become, let's say, scalable, an operation that actually makes money, makes business, satisfies the client? What do you think? Where do you think the gap lies? And in the meantime, I think, Jesus, you are back. If you can try and talk. No, we still cannot hear you, unfortunately. Marta, go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say that the main gap here is the uncertainty that generates an operation that has not taken place never in Europe. No, at the end, when we were managing to prepare our flight operations, we had like everything clear in our heads. It was like we have the technology, we have the platform, we know how it works. It was quite difficult to go through the current regulation of SORA because it's not quite adapted nowadays to these kind of platforms. But at the end, we went through it together with AESA and EASA because we collaborated all together. But I guess that the main point we faced was the uncertainty and through a lack of collaboration between the different entities. For example, we needed to talk to ENAIRE to present these very first operations. We needed to talk to SAERCO, that is the one that is in charge of the control tower of Fuerteventura. Also to the airport of Fuerteventura, because in our case, we were operating quite close to the airport. So that was really difficult for us also. And we needed to coordinate at that stage. And apart from the proper entities of navigation, of air navigation, we also needed to talk to the entities of the island by means of talking to the police, making them understand that we were going to operate with these kind of platforms, how many time, how many days or hours or whatever, where we were going to operate, because they were like very worried about flying above population, of course. So I guess that the main gap is the uncertainty, the lack of collaboration, the lack of harmonization, I would better said. No, it's like we are starting from zero, which if each one of the entities, even AESA, told us, please create new documentation link to HAPS so that we can start with something. No, we can have something written that could be able to be shared with the rest of operators and manufacturers, so that we are not starting from a white paper. No, so it's like someone has started operating, so please share with us your experience, and then we can progress with the rest of operations starting from here. So it was like the issue of being a pioneer operation itself. But I guess this is our main goal, no? Looking for this harmonization, coordination between not only national level but also at European level, trying to find a way to look for solutions to coordinate with air traffic, manned traffic, because as we are flying quite above the height of normal small UAS, let's say, we are entering in that space where the rest of manned traffic is flying. So at the end we need to be able to coordinate between everyone, like sit down in the same room and talk about these operations and try to harmonize it. I guess that's the issue, because we have regulation, even if we need to adapt the technology, the platform, we have everything, but just looking for collaboration.
This is a perfect, introduction almost for my next question to Nicki, of course, because we're talking about harmonization, we are talking about collaboration, we are talking about putting together different stakeholders, which is typically association work, right? This is exactly what, like CANSO or the likes of CANSO, at least in industry level. And of course, then you have ICAO, you were mentioning as well. So, I mean, when you are listening to that, right, what are your main concerns and priorities? Like, how do you come into play to support this, growth of the industry and this harmonized, environment?
Great question, Lorenzo. And as Marta was talking, I was just shaking my head. Yes, we need global harmonization. We need more collaboration. And we hear those words so often, right? And collaboration is really hard when you have different perspectives. But as Marta was talking, and I was shaking my head, yes, with all the various entities, the stakeholders that are involved, you need them in one space in order to have those really difficult conversations to move the needle forward, in order to get the operation actually running and on a scalable basis, right? I think it's important when you move from not just a document, and I'll highlight a few. I know that in Leo's presentation, he had one slide that had like the FAA's HATM, which is their Higher Airspace Traffic Management. Then you have the ECHO 2 project with Europe. And then you have also, our CATS CONOPS, which is the complete air traffic system. And it's the global integrator, right? The official vision when it comes to higher airspace operations. It's a globally integrated service-based ATM network that will enable seamless borderless high altitude operations, which includes, platforms like HAPS to move across regions safely and efficiently without interruption. But as Marta alluded to, how do you get from these papers to the actual operation? And I think highlighting, for example, like some case studies and making it live, and these forums that we have with like the FAA and NASA, with the ECHO 2 project, even with ICAO, as we work closely with them, which is really like they're the anchor for global harmonization and all these frameworks. It's really gathering together at spaces like even, Airspace World that's coming up next month. These arenas where we can start the work and move it forward to ensure that we have the right stakeholders in the room to do exactly what Marta said, like literally connect, collaborate, start building those relationships and trust in order to showcase what is really needed for the operation to move it forward.
Thank you very much. And I can see, Jesus, you're back. Maybe now it works.
Yes. Can you hear me now, Lorenzo?
Fantastic. Yes, I really asked you so
sorry.
many questions. No worries, it's fine. You solved it. Okay. So maybe please introduce yourself, Jesus. You have a few slides to go through. I think anyway, you will be the next in terms of my questioning. And I can ask you already the question. I mean, what we want to know from you, you are an ANSP. We heard that Spain is taking the lead in these kind of operations more and more. You are the ANSP, which is supporting that, right? So I really wanted to know, what do you need to be true, right, for a HAPS operation to be approvable and manageable by the ANSP? So you can feel free to answer the question as you go through the deck. But happy.
Okay, thank you. I can answer your. I think I can answer your question. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation to ENAIRE. My name is Jesús García. Sorry for the delay and for the inconvenience. I'm the head of air traffic flow management and airspace management in ENAIRE. Who is ENAIRE? Very briefly, we are the fourth European air navigation service provider in terms of traffic volume. We are not only an ANSP, we are providing also communication, navigation, and surveillance services to our 5 ACCs, to our terminal areas control centers, and to 21 airports that belong to the AENA network. So in this case, we are trying to play a leading role, as you have mentioned, Lorenzo. And this is very relevant for us because we see this HAPS integration as the first real test on how aviation will manage layer operations in the decades ahead. So if we get governance, data, dynamic airspace design, and contingency management right now at this moment, we will not only be enable HAPS safety and operational viability, we will also be strengthen the foundations for the broader future of higher space operation. And what changes with this HAPS for an ANSP? From our perspective, obviously, HAPS are not only simply another new entrant into the airspace system. They represent the emergence of a new operational layer with aircraft that have vastly different performance characteristics and operational profiles than conventional operations that we usually handle as an air navigation service provider. And this is not neutral for ATC. At forward load, airspace sector's complexity increase, and especially in constrained airspace. And in Europe, we have a constrained airspace. Furthermore, existing supporting infrastructure for airspace management becomes more limited as altitude increases. And additionally, there is a lack of interoperability and standardized procedures, and also in Europe and in general, I would say, a high regulatory fragmentation. So at this point, coordination from a point of view becomes a core service. And in Europe, we consider that the network manager will assume a critical coordination role, and the states, for instance, will address the civil-military coordination issue. Next slide, please. Thank you. What about our operating vision? The goal, when we talk about integrating HAPS, is a repeatable operating model that scales without degrading the wider ATM network. This point, from an ANSP perspective, is element. Key elements are operational compatibility, dynamic airspace management, shared data, clear roles for all the stakeholders, and scalable coordination mechanisms, providing predictability, standardization, and operational discipline. And in this context, the role of ANSP is really evolving. We are not only service providers in the traditional sense. We are really becoming, or we will be, so some type of integrators of layer operations. And I would like to say that we would be stewards of space equity, protectors also of the network performance, and coordinator between aviation and the increasingly space-related actors. For us, the discussion is under which operational logic these hubs can be enabled safety and at the scale without degrading the wider ATM network. And basically, we would say that the answer rests on mainly 4 pillars. The first one, a clear governance with unambiguous roles. In this sense, from the point of view, the state authority must decide, authorize, and prioritize and define the conditions of use. In Europe, Eurocontrol, for instance, the network manager would have a critical network coordination role, but should not replace the state authority. And the ANSPs must execute the airspace management at all levels, the flow management, the multi-actor cooperative decision-making, and applying, very important, dynamic airspace management. From our perspective, Europe will likely convert towards a hybrid model with a strong ANSPs and an NM-led dynamic airspace management and network protection for transitions and interfaces that are the critical part of all the process. Second, I would say interoperability with ATM systems, because this is a real safety enabler. Third, I would say that HAPS integration will rely heavily on dynamic airspace design and management in order to minimize space disruption and maximize predictability. And in this sense, for instance, we consider that we need a modular time-bounded 4D constructs and rapid release. And a clear example are the ECO2 vehicle center 4D operating zones that are more scalable and even more dynamic and efficient, because we need more smart ASM and ATFM in order to integrate these apps in a successful way. And the fourth pillar would be standardized procedural packages with robust contingency management and coordination procedures, of course, as automated as possible. So the whole logic would rest on automated and cooperative network coordination mechanism. That is another key enabler for airspace sharing. Next slide, please. Yeah, and ENAIRE is acting now. As you have mentioned, Lorenzo, in Spain, we are already seeing this transition from a limited number of exceptional cases to a more operationally relevant reality. In fact, as you can see on the right, the stratospheric operations that we have managed have increased from 6 in 2024 to 19 in 2025, in only in 1 year. And also internally, ENAIRE has articulated a corporate strategic direction that explicitly includes the integration of new uses and high-altitude airspace operation, plus a stronger role in international alliances, research, and investigation. And ENAIRE, in this sense, is involved in 3 main levels. First one, at national level, we are working in the HAPS working group. Second, at European level, ENAIRE is participating in the SESAR project, and in fact, in ECO2, we have participated. We will also participate in ECO3, in the SCAN project that will focus on adapting and developing the CNS infrastructure and services to ensure the secure integration of, in general, high-altitude operations. And we are also collaborating with the EASA in the preparation of the draft regulatory framework that will come to reality, we hope, in the coming year, as well as with ICAO in a working group about high-altitude operation. And just today, we have formally joined a task force on the safe integration of space transport operations. And that's all from my side. In conclusion, I would say that the goal is not only to integrate HAPS into ATM, into a traditional ATM. The goal is really to evolve ATM to accommodate HAPS at a scale, building an operating model that can scale without degrading the performance of the wider air traffic network. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we will come back to you for sure. I have a kind of a mid panel thought here. Like, I mean, everybody's talking about. I feel there are 2 areas that we need to focus on, right? There is the area of how do I actually get an operation approved? We mentioned, Marta, you were talking about, the SORA 2.5, the modifications to that framework that are really required. And I can see among the attendees, there is a good friend, Jörg Dietrich, which obviously has this, at least in Jaros, in his hands. And so, definitely there is something there that which we can do. And then there is the other aspect that I think both you, Leo, Jesús, you mentioned, the airspace itself, right? It's like, Leo, you mentioned it, we can do radical innovation, once we are above flight level 500. You, Jesús, mentioned, of course, but you need to get there, right? So we need to find a way to modify whatever is below that flight level, so to accommodate. So let's maybe spend a couple of minutes investigating those 2 aspects, and maybe with you, Nicki, then figuring out really internationally and with the various projects like ICAO, for example, how those are being considered. Maybe let's start first with you, Marta, in terms of operational frameworks. You used the kind of a modified SORA. How does that feel? How much do we need to modify it more? Or probably maybe we need something else. I don't know. Just give us a feeling in terms of operational authorization. And probably this also answered partly one of the questions which is up there. And by the way, for the participants, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A and I will ask them. There is a question about what do you think is the most appropriate framework, right, to authorize such a modern and complex system. So what is your experience, Marta?
Yeah, it's a very good question indeed. When we started preparing this operational authorization, we had a clear idea of what we needed to fly, let's say, because we needed to fly between Fuerteventura and Gran Canaria, just to give a little bit of context. And we were seeing, okay, we are now under SORA 2.0, but SORA 2.5 will be published in a few months. This was like the regulatory barrier that we needed to face at that stage. And the issue is that we found some things that were okay for us in SORA 2.0, but we needed the way that was GRC quantified, for example, in the case of SORA 2.5. So we did a very thorough analysis through these two methodologies. And then was when we had the very, very nice opportunity of participating in the HAU task force within JEROS. That was just what you have mentioned, Lorenzo. And well, the thing right now is that, as you know, SORA 2.5 has recently been published, and they are indeed working now in SORA 3.0. So just they do not stop, let's say. Our contribution to the task force, was focused on adapting SORA 2.5 to HAPS. So we created like kind of documentation, gathering all these points that we needed to modify, let's say, no? So going into detail and trying to be at the same time as brief as possible, we saw that SORA is relatively easy to interpret for small UAS, but it's not the case really for HAPS. So we can highlight some key points to better understand this issue. First of all, there are some key characteristics of the HAPS that have been already mentioned by Léonard. Like, for example, is the case of the low wing loading, the low mass, the low maneuverability. And indeed, this kind of characteristics, we saw that they resulted in a lower stall speed. In the case, for example, of the low maneuverability, resulted in a lower stall speed, but also as lower response. So the HAPS operate at very high altitudes, and we have a slow response if we encountered unmanned traffic. So again, this is a problem that needed to be faced with ENAIRE, but needed also to be, let's say, reflected in this documentation, in this operational authorization. So the way to understand that, okay, we are low, we are slow responding, but we have already coordinated with ENAIRE how to do this. So don't be afraid of that, no? That was how we reflected this in our operational authorization. We have also the thing of being operating across different airspace classes during several weeks or even several days at very high altitudes. So this needed also to be reflected somehow, that the risk was not a thing of a couple of minutes, but we are flying there for lots of hours. So what we did was, okay, we are going to reach we are going to fly as high as possible to avoid the maximum risk between the flight levels that really affect ENAIRE operations. And this was quite difficult because, as you may know, HAPS do not operate the same during the whole year. During summer, you are able to fly higher. During winter, you need to fly lower because you have less sunlight. So it was quite difficult to let's say, give a right answer to this kind of performance during through the different flight levels. On the other hand, regarding risk, that is what really affects the proper SORA, there is a shift from ground to air. At low altitude, we avoid populated areas, but at high altitude, ground risk decreases while air risk increases due to potential traffic interactions. No, that was what I was saying before about coordinating with ENAIRE. But going through the main issue of the ground risk that I wanted to mention, in case of impact, we are typically dealing with energies around 300 kilojoules. So this leads to the need to demonstrate that even if the platforms falls and we have a flight termination system, so it does not fall with strong energy, but with less energy than expected even, we need to demonstrate through the SORA, through the operational authorization, that we are not going to make a significant impact if we fall. So we need to carry out specific studies to justify that there is no significant impact on the ground. For example, dedicated falling analysis of the platform, location-based impact assessments, lethal risk analysis. I mean, there are like different ways of demonstrating this, but it was surely one of the most relevant points that we needed to demonstrate. Then another thing is the flight is the connectivity. Sorry, the connectivity of the hubs. It was also key. Hubs operations, as we already know, are fully beyond visual line of sight. So VLOS operations and visual observers are not applicable. We need to go further. We need to rely on another way of maintaining the 99% connectivity that we need to address a way of relying on the operation, no? So that we need to rely on satellite connectivity. We need to establish some antennas in the ground in different islands to maintain a continuous connectivity with the platform. And that was also a study that we needed to carry out, and we needed to add it to the operational authorization. So to say, AESA, don't worry, because we have always the hubs under control. So I will say that are the main points. Air risk class is always affected by understanding that we are flying high, we are flying too many hours, and we are sometimes interfering with manned aircraft. So we need to find a way with ENAIRE or with the ANSP in question to find the flight level in which we are okay, we are not interfering with the rest. So that's something that needs to be agreed with the ANSP depending on summer and winter. That's one very important point. The ground risk class regarding the impact on the ground, of course, demonstrating that these platforms are not able to do any significant impact. And the other that is very important is the last one I've said about connectivity, demonstrating that we are able to maintain control over the platform at any time during any of the weeks that could be flying high above. Yeah.
Thank you. This is very, very comprehensive. Thank you very much for this answer, because I think I want to quickly go to Leo. You were mentioning, I know that Leo, you're not necessarily a huge fan of adapting SORA for certain type of apps operation. I think we're looking for something even more advanced. But I wanted to understand from you, when you were mentioning this concept of radical innovation, I think you have great ambition in these regards for the operations at high altitudes. So can you tell us, like in your experience, what is it that we need, especially at those higher flight levels?
Well, so I think with the radical innovation, I can touch on the two sides of like the approval and the airspace management. Let me comment on what Marta said with SORA. SORA today, it works well for certain aircraft that are like highly predictable. Like we know in advance exactly what the trajectory will be, what the plan will be. Works very well for a test flight that is like kind of an isolated thing. But if you think as like these platforms will be airborne, and some are airborne for like 10 months or 12 months. When the platform launches, you don't know the flight plan for the next 12 months, right? The mission may change. There's maybe a fire in a different area of the country where you want to relocate to do like wildfire monitoring. Winds change, and so the flight paths change. And so ultimately, you need to find ways to automate SORA or to do like live SORA risk assessment, risk modeling on the fly as you fly, so that you can apply the spirit of SORA, but on the go, like as you fly. When you're a balloon or when you're like these lighter than air platforms, you have these like what trajectories. So it looks like a hurricane track, the trajectory. Those are the kind of things that you need really to think of how differently you integrate. Now, when you think of radical innovation for airspace management, again, I'm back to the automated fleet. Some of these operators, like especially on the lighter than air side right now, they have hundreds of airborne assets across the world. When I am Sceye and I launch and I want to make sure that I don't run into them, and my flight is going to transit over 7 countries, I need to be able to digitally deconflict with them, regardless of what country we're in, right? We talk about like airspace, like where we talk about global harmonization. I think the key difference is that for HAPS, that global harmonization need is today. Like when I fly my test flight, it crosses 7 nations. That needs to be harmonized. And if there is an operator with assets across those 7 countries, I need to have the digital deconfliction that works the same across those 7 countries, regardless of where they are. And so this is where I think we can really start to think about, and I think this is something that CANSO really is exploring with services that are not necessarily geographically bounded, but like that are providing service to a specific aircraft or to a specific system across borders. Can a service provide a deconfliction service to an operator, regardless of where the operation is across the world? Can it transcend those borders? Because ultimately, also from an economical point of view, we have 180 nations. And I don't know how many ANSPs, but you mentioned 97 are members of CANSO. As we have those international flights, if we want to have these kind of super systems that kind of like become super regional, and where we don't need each country to have like the very like the transition that happens like on small scale, because the difficulty to integrate and harmonize across like 97 ANSPs, for example, is very difficult. So can we switch the model from being aircraft-centric instead of geographic-centric, where ENAIRE could provide service to HAPS over the middle of the Pacific, essentially?
I mean, it's a fantastic question you did that. So I don't even have to ask the next question. I mean, Nicki, for you, can we do that? And maybe at the end, Jesús, your perspective, like, can we do this? This is pretty awesome, right? And I one thing that I really love about what Leo and both Marta said, differently to a lot of other conversation that we have in the drone world in general, which is all about the future, we will need it in 2035, 2040. This we need now, right? These operations are actually occurring now. We saw all of you have beautiful slides with operations happening across multiple countries. So we're not talking about the theoretical future, right? We are talking about today, right? So Nicki, what is CANSO's perspective on that? Yeah, we have a lot of work ahead of you, and I'm sure you're already doing a lot.
There is, and there's work that's already being done, and Leo knows about this very much, right, within our CATS ConOps, but also working very closely with ICAO, because when you're talking about states, like, yes, we represent from CANSO the 96 ANSPs, air navigation service providers, but there's 193 nations that ICAO represent, right? So we are very much working closely with them. They have their ICAO, HAO work group that is currently working on a global CONOPS that we are involved in. And there's, again, the work that's being done with FAA, CANSO, ICAO, Eurocontrol with Echo 2, they're all feeding into things that these ANSPs use, like the GAMP and the ASBUs, right? And ensuring that the emerging global concepts like HAO and HAPS operation can span across FIR boundaries. So our frameworks just need to be globally aligned. But with that, as you know, 193 nations and sovereign airspace, that's a lot of work. So I will encourage as well as challenge those of us that are panelists on this webinar, but those that are involved to get involved in the work, not only in, you know, our CATS work group, which is area 4 that we're launching here soon, but also in the ICAO frameworks, because again, it goes back to that collaboration effort, right? We need to all work together to essentially get to what I was talking about before on the global aviation community, to integrate into service-based ATM network, which will then enable us to get to that borderless higher airspace or higher altitude operations service, right? Where ENAIRE can actually manage something across the Pacific and vice versa. But in order to do that, it just does not happen overnight. It is forums like this. It's the collaboration. It's the talking about the case studies, which are really important, but not only sharing best practices, right? Not only what's working, but what's not working, and don't use it as a challenge, but really use it as an opportunity to grow in order to get us where we really do need to go. But that's hard work, you know, because everyone within, you know, not only this forum, but others as well, they all have their own perspective, but then you have, you know, state regulations and what they have to abide by as well.
And, you know, I cannot not ask this question to Jesus, because, I mean, I'm used to this environment where, like, you know, we dream of possible futures, and we must, right? Because we want to innovate, we want to go, you know, and we need, otherwise operations cannot happen. But then there are those like you, right, that are managing the existing, and you're like, oh, guys, you know, this is gonna be a problem. So does this new future like excite you or scares you? Like, how do you see this? Because you are really, like, at the end of the day, in charge of the safety of the airspace, right? So, and I know what that feels, right? So what is your reaction to this?
No, this future, we share this future vision that Léonard has explained. In fact, as I have mentioned before, ENAIRE has included in its strategic plan and a specific point devoted to this type of operation, or to the future integration. Nevertheless, although I understand the need to be global cross-border from day one, it would be, of course, ideal. And having global cross-border CONOPS and architecture integrating cooperatives, the completely automated operation, and IFI in the same space, because this is directional consistent with ICAO's warning that says that fragmented state-by-state regulation, in fact, inhibits growth and can compromise safety. So I don't see this future vision as something unachievable. I think this is something we have to be working on now, right now. And from this point of view, ENAIRE, of course, in all the forums where it's working, supports the harmonization needed. But I have to insist on the near-term needs, on the near-term reality, that is the transition through controlled airspace solutions that are really being validated in Europe. In fact, Echo 2 project is doing the right thing, in my opinion, by focusing first on the transition phase into controlled airspace, because that's where low speed, drift, and contingencies could collide with the network performance and even with safety.
Thank you. Sorry, I was thank you so much. What I feel like really different from this panel, from many other panels I've heard, is that there is some sort of a agreement, or if you want, among different stakeholders, which typically would have different, you know, needs or interests. That we are kind of all in agreement that this is worth doing, that operations are important, that there is potentially, business if we do it correctly, that we need to change something, otherwise it's not going to scale. But you mentioned ICAO multiple times, and everybody's always saying ICAO is slow to react. They are always last for good reason, right? But it seems like they are already on it, right? So it means that I think the need is quite real, and it feels that people are really working and coordinating. So I think the message really is not so much let's start to do something new, but let's please cooperate. I like, Nicki, your message, like join the existing groups, because those groups are the ones which ultimately will frame, right, the future of this industry. And so if you want to frame it yourself, just get involved. It's always easy to complain afterwards, but it's good to get involved at the beginning. I think we have 3 more minutes. Maybe I can ask from every one of you just 30 seconds or 45 seconds. What do you wish for your industry, like in the next 1 to 2 years? If you had a wish to come true, what would be the most impactful thing that the ecosystem can do to support, promote, foster, whatever is your perspective, whether an operator, an ANSP, or an association? And we can start maybe with you, Nicki, and we go from there.
Wow, on the spot, eh? I think I see it now, but I do think that we could do more and more of it when, we talk about all these concepts, but we have case studies that are already out there that's flying. I would really like to see more of that. So more on the implementation side, really on the integration though, right? Like we talk about it all the time, but it's the integration part of it and more trust. We talk about, collaboration and harmonization all the time, but in order to do those two things, you need everyone in the room, the various stakeholders, and the trust amongst each other, as you were alluding to, Lorenzo. Like we do have the one motivation to get this done and get it done right. So I would like to see more and more of that, so we can continue moving it forward together as a global aviation community and not segregate it.
Thank you. I mean, no pressure there, Marta and Leo. We need to fly. We need to integrate. So, Marta, what about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with Nicki. I think that we need to ground this in real world use cases to enable operations. And I say this because sometimes when we start thinking about HAPS operations, suddenly we go through very complicated use cases and suddenly we lose ourselves. No, the priorities will be to build operational experience step by step, focusing first in lower risk scenarios such as sail to operations. For example, this allows operators and regulators to validate the concepts, to mature technologies, refine procedures with the ANSPs in a controlled environment before moving to more complex missions. By consolidating at the end these initial operations, we can generate the evidence, the confidence needed to scale up safely, instead of trying to move too quickly into higher risk frameworks without sufficient operational background. So I think that we need to go step by step, and that will give us the opportunity to go further. But we really need to ground this, and we need to go together with all of this, of course.
Thank you. Leo.
Well, so the HAPS industry players are planning live flight trials, deconfliction flight trials in the 2028 horizon. What I would love, my dream, is to have industry, the FAA, European regulators come together to coordinate a test that is across FIRs, where we can have at play cooperatively deconflicting HAPS, where we can integrate ATC managed traffic coming through, and that we can try essentially the ConOps that ultimately both Eurocontrol and FAA devised that are very similar, and we can bring them together through a flight trial and learn from that. And so calling in to make that 2028 flight trial a reality, and calling in on the states to work with industry and industry to work with the states and ANSP's regulators to make that flight trial possible.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a very solid and practical dream. And Jesús, last word to you.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell my dream. I only would say that maybe nowadays the key barriers to scaling HAPS are the regulatory fragmentation, the lack of standardized procedures, and in some cases the operational uncertainty linked to this type of operation, especially in contingencies. And from this point of view, I would ask to the national safety regulators or the civil aviation of each country a single coordination framework. We have had some experience, and really it's a nightmare for a single ANSP to deal with the situation. So this single coordination framework, I mean, one stop shop for missions would be very, very useful, as well as clear designation of responsibilities. For operators, also a minimum mission data sets based on the requirements previously provided. We would also need, as site navigation service provided, sufficient planning horizon. And I hope that the dream that Léonard has explained, maybe in a couple of years, can have this requirement I have mentioned.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We are a couple of minutes above time, but I think we are good. It was very interesting. I didn't want to stop you before. So thank you very much to all of you for having joined us on the panel. Thank you to the panelists, of course. I think it was very, very interesting. At least for me, it was very exciting and interesting panel. And again, thank you for everyone that was online listening to us until the end. You are superstars, and speak with you next time. Thank you so much.